Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow morning, you check the weather. It says negative 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Not with wind chill, not feels like. Actually, minus 53. Your phone probably wouldn't survive. Your car definitely wouldn't start. The pipes in your house would freeze solid. Step outside without the right clothes. And exposed skin begins freezing in minutes. Now imagine something worse. No house, no heater, no electricity, no supermarket, no winter jacket, no sleeping bag, no emergency shelter. Just frozen ground stretching all the way to the horizon. Welcome to Europe, around 25,000 years ago, the Ice Age. And here's the question that should honestly keep you awake tonight. How did humans not go extinct? Seriously. We weren't polar bears. We didn't have thick fur. We didn't hibernate. We couldn't magically tolerate temperatures that kill modern hikers every single year. Everything about the Ice Age seems designed to erase a naked primate from existence. And yet, not only did humans survive, they expanded. They hunted mammoths, raised children, created art, invented technology, buried their dead, told stories around fires, and eventually inherited the earth. How? Because the answer isn't that humans became tougher, it's that they became smarter, far smarter than most people realize. And once you understand the tricks they discovered, the Ice Age stops looking like humanity's greatest obstacle. It starts looking like the place where we became human. Let's go. First, we need to fix a common misconception. When people hear Ice Age, they imagine one endless frozen wasteland, blizzards every day. Nothing alive except mammoths and the occasional saber-toothed cat, basically Antarctica, with worse neighbors. Reality was much stranger. Large parts of Europe and Asia were cold, extremely cold, but many weren't buried beneath giant glaciers. Instead, they were vast grasslands, called the Mammoth steppe, an ecosystem unlike anything alive today. Millions of square miles of dry, windy plains, covered with grasses, wildflowers, shrubs, and enormous herds of animals, mammoths, bison, reindeer, wild horses, musk oxen. Enough life to support one of the greatest hunting grounds our species has ever known. Cold didn't mean empty. In many places, it meant abundance, if you knew how to survive it. And that's where the real challenge began, because humans weren't built for cold, biologically. We're almost embarrassingly bad at it. Our closest relatives, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, all evolved in warm environments. So did we, compared to Arctic mammals. We're basically tropical animals pretending to be winter experts. We have almost no insulating fur, thin skin, sweat glands everywhere, a body specifically designed to lose heat, which is fantastic. If you're chasing prey across the African savanna, it's considerably less useful. When the air itself is trying to kill you, in temperatures below freezing, your body immediately begins making impossible choices. Blood leaves your fingers, then your toes, then your nose, then your ears. Core temperature becomes the only priority. Everything else is expendable. If your internal temperature falls by only a few degrees, confusion begins. Muscles stop cooperating. Decision-making collapses, eventually. Even the instinct to survive disappears. Hypothermia is terrifying, precisely because it convinces people they're fine, right before they die. So, how did ancient humans beat something like that? Not with stronger bodies, with better engineering. Let's start with clothing. Because ancient clothing wasn't primitive, it was revolutionary. For years, people imagined Ice Age. Humans throwing random animal skins over their shoulders like movie cavemen. That's almost certainly wrong. Archaeologists have discovered bone needles dating back more than 40,000 years. Real sewing needles, complete with tiny eyes for threading. Think about what that means. You don't invent a sewing needle unless you're making fitted clothing. Loose hides leak heat. Tailored clothing traps warm air. The difference can literally determine whether someone survives the night. Researchers studying Arctic peoples have found that carefully sewn animal hide clothing rivals some modern cold weather equipment. Reindeer hide, especially winter hide, contains thousands of hollow hairs, Each hair traps air. Air becomes insulation. Nature invented thermal jackets long before humans invented down coats. Ancient people simply figured out how to wear them. Layer after layer. Fur facing inward. Fur facing outward. Different animals serving different purposes. Some for warmth, some for waterproofing, some for flexibility. Every stitch mattered. And every stitch represented accumulated knowledge passed through generations. Then came shelter. Again, forget the cartoon version. People weren't wandering endlessly through snowstorms every night. Where caves existed, they used them. But caves were surprisingly rare. Most humans had to build. One of the most astonishing discoveries comes from modern-day Ukraine. Entire homes built from mammoth bones. Not decorations, not ritual monuments, homes. Massive curved structures assembled from skulls, tusks, jawbones, and hundreds of enormous mammoth bones, covered with hides, anchored against brutal winds. Imagine looking around your living room. Now imagine every wall was built from the skeleton of an elephant. That's essentially what they accomplished. And it worked. Because mammoths provided almost everything: meat, fat, hide, bones, even fuel. Which brings us to perhaps the greatest Ice Age survival trick of all: fat. Modern nutrition has given fat a complicated reputation. To an Ice Age hunter, fat was life itself. Protein alone can't sustain you. In fact, eating too much lean meat without enough fat can actually kill you. Explorers called it rabbit starvation. Your body needs fat to process enormous amounts of protein efficiently. Mammoths, reindeer, bison. These weren't simply meals. They were walking fuel tanks, bone marrow, brain tissue, organ fat. Every calorie mattered. Nothing went to waste. And here's something remarkable. Archaeologists have found evidence that ancient hunters deliberately smashed large bones, not for the bone itself, but for the rich marrow hidden inside. Some even stored fat for future use. Thousands of years before refrigeration, they already understood that fat was too valuable to lose. Now, let's talk about fire. Because everyone knows humans used fire, almost nobody realizes how sophisticated they became at managing it. Keeping a fire alive during an ice age isn't easy. Wet wood burns poorly, snow buries fuel. Strong winds steal heat, so humans adapted. They collected enormous fuel reserves, protected embers overnight, transported fire between camps. Some researchers even believe groups carefully maintained continuous fires for months, never allowing them to go completely out, because starting from scratch in freezing weather wasn't merely inconvenient. It could be deadly. Fire wasn't just warmth. It dried clothing, cooked food, hardened wooden spears, produced light, repelled predators, created social space, extended waking hours. The campfire became the center of human life, not just physically, mentally. Something extraordinary happens when people gather around fire. Conversation changes. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherers consistently find that nighttime discussions become dramatically different from daytime conversations. During the day, people discuss work, food, planning. At night, they tell stories. Stories about ancestors, animals, heroes, morality, the invisible world. The fire didn't simply keep humans alive. It created culture. Now here's the part almost nobody expects. The Ice Age may actually have made humans smarter. Not genetically, behaviorally. Every winter became an enormous intelligence test. Could you remember migration routes? Predict weather, recognize dangerous ice, store enough food, repair clothing, maintain tools, read animal tracks buried beneath fresh snow? One mistake could wipe out an entire family. Selection pressure wasn't just physical anymore. It increasingly rewarded planning, memory, communication, cooperation. The people who survived weren't necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who shared information best. Knowledge became a survival tool, and knowledge compounds. One generation learns to sew. The next improves the design. Another discovers better shelter. Another invents spear throwers. Another perfects food storage. Culture began evolving faster than biology ever could. That's humanity's real superpower. Not claws, not speed, not strength. Ideas. And perhaps the most incredible idea of all was cooperation. A lone human stood almost no chance against an Ice Age winter. A group was astonishingly resilient. People hunted together, shared food, cared for injured members, raised children collectively. Even individuals with severe disabilities sometimes survived for years, evidence that others fed and protected them. Think about that. When archaeologists discover skeletons showing healed injuries that would have been impossible to survive alone, they're discovering compassion. 30,000 years ago, in one of the harshest environments our species ever faced, kindness turned out to be survival technology. Now, let's answer the original question. How did ancient humans survive temperatures approaching negative 53 degrees Fahrenheit? Not because they were immune to cold, they weren't. Not because they evolved thick fur, they didn't. They survived because they transformed intelligence into protection. They wore engineered clothing instead of growing fur, built houses instead of digging dens, stored calories instead of relying on constant hunting, mastered fire instead of fearing darkness, shared knowledge instead of keeping secrets, shared food instead of letting the weak die. Every problem nature created, humans answered with another invention. And that's what makes the Ice Age one of the most important chapters in our history. It wasn't simply an environmental disaster. It was the greatest engineering challenge our species had ever faced. One that forced a vulnerable African primate to become something entirely different. Because by the time the glaciers finally retreated, humans weren't just surviving the planet anymore. We had learned how to reshape it. The Ice Age didn't nearly end humanity. In many ways, it built humanity